some breaking news with our political editor, Andrew Clennell. And Andrew, this relates to what the government's going to do in terms of stimulus when it comes to the all-important housing construction sector.
Yes, Kieran. New homeowner grants are to be the next cab off the rank when it comes to federal government stimulus, with Treasurer Josh Frydenberg and Assistant Treasurer Michael Sukkar set to introduce them in a residential construction package to be announced as early as this week, expected this week. The states have introduced these kind of measures before, usually $5,000 or $10,000 grants, but traditionally they've only been for first home buyers. This will be across the board, not just for first home buyers, as the government looks to prevent a 30 to 50% drop in residential construction, which would damage supply and housing affordability down the track. They don't care who builds homes, the government, in this COVID-19 crisis, as long as they are built and construction jobs are saved. Also on the agenda in the next week, Kieran, we can expect a decision on what the government does with free childcare when that policy finishes at the end of June. It is highly unlikely the government will keep this free arrangement going, but they are looking at ways to help parents out more. For the government to increase the subsidy for parents across the board would require legislation, so the government is reluctant to go down this path, as they fear Labor and the Greens would attempt in the Senate to fight for free childcare to continue. The government view is they were able to afford to provide free childcare during the shutdowns to keep the industry going because the number of children attending was so low at that time. But with numbers coming back now, it would cost about $14 billion a year to keep it going, and that is just too much with so many other demands on the budget. Instead, they are looking at other measures, including bigger subsidies from parents tied to the activity test, where parents working or looking for work will be given priority and helped in terms of childcare access and cost. At the moment, the more parents demonstrate activity, the greater their right to subsidy. This could be increased.
Andrew, while the Prime Minister is trying to build consensus on industrial relations, the government, the Morrison government, also taking this consensus approach between treasurers, both federal and state.
Yes, so as outlined after National Cabinet on Friday, Scott Morrison confirmed that body was replacing COAG, something we revealed last week. It is Josh Frydenberg and the state treasurers who are going to be meeting fortnightly to try to thrash out various reforms in everything from tax and deregulation, transport and infrastructure, population and migration, skills, the regions and energy. Scott Morrison, thinking like his former job, a treasurer here, figuring the treasurers can work things out responsibly because they want to focus on responsible spending as we aim for a reform agenda out of this crisis. Already we know the axing or scaling back of payroll tax and stamp duty are being considered. The Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe addressed a meeting of all the treasurers on Friday where he made it clear to both federal and state treasurers that where things are at, they should look to spend and not be afraid of spending in a bid to curb unemployment. Well, one thing not being spent is $810 million by the New South Wales government on ANZ Stadium. We foreshadowed this last week and it was announced in the papers today. Gladys Berejiklian, the New South Wales Premier, she lost skin at the state election last year, taking a two stadiums policy to the election. Now one of the projects is kaput anyway, thanks to this crisis. NRL Chief Peter V'landys, he's been reported to have lobbied the Premier before to spend the money on suburban stadiums instead, so no doubt talks will begin on that again. We have, in other economic news, Kieran, we have the March national accounts on Wednesday, which will tell us if we are officially heading to a technical recession or not. Maybe the panic buying stops GDP going negative by the end of March, but that will not matter given that it's forecast that there'll be a 10% drop in the June quarter. Economic shock, recession, it doesn't matter if it's technical or not.
Andrew, we'll be discussing that further with John Keogh and yourself. John Keogh from the Financial Review a bit later in the program. But before you go and before Jim Chalmers joins us, I want to get your thoughts and some developments I think you've got today on Queensland when it comes to their approach to borders. What's happening?
Yeah, so the state borders, that issue featured again at National Cabinet Friday, as you'd expect, with Queensland and South Australia now said to be closer to moving on taking away their hard borders in July. The WA and Tasmania, who are pretty firm in their positions. Scott Morrison is being very diplomatic in National Cabinet discussions on this one, said to be quite sympathetic to Anastasia Palaszczuk's position, despite his ministers like Simon Birmingham and Peter Dutton pushing the case for a border reopening. My understanding is, as early as today, Kieran, the Queensland Premier may announce a lifting of restrictions on distance you're allowed to travel around the state, which will be a boost to North Queensland, but you will leave the interstate border closures in place for at least another month because of concerns about community transmission in Victoria, announcing another review in time for the July school holidays on that measure. Well, here in a Queensland election year is perhaps a reason why this policy is occurring. Ben Oaquist from the Australian Institute said when he saw Afternoon Agenda revealing some polling that showed 85% of Queenslanders wanted the borders shut, that he would commission his own polling. Here are the results. Asked, do you support state border closures? 78% of people in Queensland support it and 14% oppose. In WA, 88% support, 9% opposition. Asked if they supported the way the Queensland government had handled the closures, national figure, 69 to 23. In Queensland, 76 to 17. Even in New South Wales, majority support but smaller, 59 to 32 for the Queensland approach. Which brings me to some other research, Kieran. The News poll this week, News poll analysis showing just how much trouble federal Labor are in Queensland and WA, where they need to win seats in 2022 to win government. The News poll analysis found two-party preferred since March. Labor absolutely languishes in Queensland behind 56-44 and in WA 45-55. But it's 50-50 in New South Wales, 55-45 to Anthony Albanese's Labor in Victoria, 53-47 to Labor in SA. Scott Morrison won 23 out of 30 seats in Queensland last year. Labor probably needs to win at least 4 seats there to win a majority in 2022. How do they do that with such terrible numbers, Kieran?